In today's episode, we're speaking to Doug Howarth. Doug Howarth has unveiled a groundbreaking theory called hypernomics. This theory isn't just for economists, it's for anybody who wants to unlock new possibilities in wealth building. In a nutshell, hypernomics challenges the traditional law of supply and demand by suggesting that the relationship between and demand isn't what we've always assumed. What if higher prices didn't necessarily lead to decreased demand? What if customers were willing to pay more for products they perceived as having greater value? It's a fresh perspective on a market forces that transcends economic theory. Let's speak to Doug and find out how he changed his life by changing his mindset. Let's find out. Welcome, welcome. This is Gull, your money mindset expert. And today I'm so excited. We have the amazing, the wonderful Doug Howarth. Welcome, Doug.
Gull, thank you so much for having me on. It's my great pleasure to be on your show. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Doug, everyone's heard your intro. They know how fabulous you are. But please, in your own words, tell everybody what it is that you do.
Um, well, I, you mean my personal journey? Is that what you're talking
No,
about?
no.
How
So
I got here?
what do you specialize in? What do you do for,
Oh,
what
I'm
do you do
sorry.
now? Yeah.
I specialize in a field that I just discovered, which we call hypernomics, which is the study of how markets work in four or more dimensions. And it sounds complicated, but it actually takes some very simple ideas that you already know and then glues them back together in ways you haven't seen before so that you can make some more sense of your world economically.
I mean, it sounds absolutely amazing. So when I first heard of this, when I heard about you, it blew me away. I've never looked at economics the way you look at it. So I'm excited to learn about that. But we'll hold off for that. I want to talk more about your journey. I want to, this is amazing and a very unique concept. It's not something that I've ever come across before. Honestly, I've only came across this when I was looking at your media kit. So talk me through what led you to this journey and how did you end up finding this?
Well, I went into university studying economics,
Hmm.
and while I was studying, I was subject to a life-threatening disease. My kidneys were failing from age 17, and so I was starting to go downhill. And I did really well in economics. I mean, I graduated top of my class and went off to graduate school, but I never quite believed what they were telling me. And I didn't know if it was because I couldn't understand it or because maybe there was something wrong with it. So what
Mm.
happened was left graduate school twice, and yeah, both times I just dropped out of grad school and started working in industry for a while, and then decades go by, 3 decades. And then my best friend Tim Schreiner gave me a kidney, and all of
It
a
took you
sudden,
that
after
long.
going,
It took you that long to get a kidney.
well, I got one before that, but it didn't
Oh,
work very
oh.
well. So I got one when I was 40, but that didn't work very well. Then I got one when I was 47, and all of a sudden, my blood cleared up, and along with it, my brain started to work better.
Mm.
And so that allowed me to do was it allowed me to think in different ways. And so then one day, when the wife and I were going out shopping for a washing machine of all things, I realized that when she was shopping for it, she was shopping for it using four dimensions at one time.
Mm.
Now, how did she do that? Well, we went to the washing machine and she said, "You know, I like this machine." We were staring at one at a store. She says, "It's got more capacity than the one we have at home. It's got a bigger drum." So I thought
Yeah.
capacity versus price.
Hmm.
That's a two-dimensional problem. Then
Hmm.
she said, "You know, we don't have but one gentle cycle at home, and I'd like to have more cycles." So I thought cycles in capacity versus price. She was up to a 3D problem.
Hmm.
And then we're going in the store and you see the next one up the line. It's the same brand, but a different size and everything. I go, "What about this one?" And she said, "It's too expensive. We can't afford it." And I realized that we are going to actually buy one unit and push the quantity sold for this unit that we're going to buy, the one that was smaller, out by one for that year. And so that was adding quantity to the mix. And so we were considering capacity, cycles, price, and quantity all at the same time. Those are four dimensions.
Hmm.
And so I raced home and figured out a way to plot in four dimensions, and that became Hypernomics.
Amazing. And talk me through this, your journey before even, I know that this is that you found now, but what made you leave your grad school? And yeah, and what, was it the lack of interest, or you either felt that you needed to do work? What made you not complete grad school?
Well, the first grad school I lost, I quit because I was having a hard time understanding some of the math, and I think that was because my brain was
Okay.
starting to fog up. And the second time I left, it was because of lack of interest. I just didn't like what I was studying. So the first grad school was economics. The second grad school was a business school.
And it was
And
you were interested in the
yeah,
content. So
right.
you went into employment for how long?
I'm sorry, what? Say
You
that
went
again,
into
please.
employment, so you were working for someone else for how
Ah,
long?
yes. Yeah, 33 years.
And then what made you switch over to become self-employed and have your own business?
Because I realized that that what my discovery was actually world changing, and I wanted to bring it to the world and start to make the world a better place. It will make the world a better place. The more widespread these ideas become, it's going to help the world out quite a bit.
Hmm.
It'll start to reduce the up and down cycles of the market. It'll help reduce the frequency that we have crashes and skyrocketing over too much optimism in the market. So it's going to dampen the market cycles, and it's going to decrease the frequency with which the markets go up and down. And then it helps every person in business too, and in government if they use these techniques.
So let me come back to you then. How difficult was it, even though you've got this brainchild and you fall in love with this methodology, and I can see all the benefits for it, and absolutely it's
Right.
wonderful. But then, ideas are dime a dozen. There's so many people have these amazing ideas, but very few of them act upon it and actually do something about it. And you have. So when I see what was different about you, what made you take that plunge? Because if you've been in employment for 3 decades, and then jumping ship and going into having your own business, it's a complete different ballgame. And even though you may have the most amazing idea and you may have the capital, behind you to support you, it's still a big change. So talk me through, how did you overcome the mindset barriers for that?
Well, the main reason I was able to overcome the mindset barriers is that the math works out. The math is always accurate. Basically, what this discovers is that people self-aggregate their behaviors in ways in which we can describe that, and it
Mm,
works out that when we talk about the demand for a product, there's a certain outer limit for the demand, an upper limit and an outer limit, and a lower limit and an inner limit. And it turns out that we can actually describe that mathematically. And it turns out at the same time, while there's a certain amount of demand, there's the other side, which we call value. And so there's a certain value, for example, to the computer that you've got. It's got a certain screen size, got a certain capacity, much like that washing machine that we were talking about. And so
mm.
people self-aggregate their behavior in terms of how they buy things too. And it turns out that they're on opposite sides of this price line. And this phenomenon known as hypernomics is something that everybody does all the time intuitively in ways in which we can describe it mathematically. So figuring out the math behind that was the impetus for just saying, hey, I've got to take a chance here
Mm,
to make the world a better place, frankly, to try to improve my life too.
mm.
And so I just took the big leap, left a nice cushy job at Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, and that's hard for a lot of
Yeah,
people, even if
right.
they love their idea. This is what I'm trying to get to, because this
Yes,
podcast is the audience for it are people either from the corporate background like myself, or currently in the corporate background.
right,
They're currently working in the corporate world and have been thinking about transitioning over for years. It could be, since their 40s and 50s, and they may even be in their 60s now, and they still haven't
right.
taken the plunge. So I'm trying to decipher from you, what was that that thought, the idea that gave you the courage to take the plunge, because it's literally that it's the courage that you require to take a shift, and whether you sink and swim, that's another thing altogether. But it's taking that plunge.
Yeah, well, it just got to the point. I was in my 50s when I decided to, I thought the idea was very nascent then, but it was a strong idea, and it had been
Mm.
proven out again by the math and by observation. And so I just said, hey, I'm going to make a plunge. Now, my wife, who's a school teacher, um, school teachers tend to be pretty conservative, so she
Yeah.
wasn't really in favor of that. I mean, but we've had some pretty good sized contracts since then, and we've managed to eke out 13 years of this. They're right on the cusp of starting to grow. And just last month, I ended up going to an international conference and getting a Best Paper Award overall, and got a chance to address 450 people, telling them about how this works in a detailed way. And my work's never been challenged, actually. And so I've put out 13 peer-reviewed papers to date. Nobody's challenged my work. So
That
it,
amazing, absolutely
yeah.
amazing. It really is.
So it works, and there's no getting around it. So we're trying to convince the masses that this is useful stuff. So.
So, what advice would you have for someone who may have an equally brilliant idea, and they've been sitting on it for the past 3, 4, 5, even 10 years, and they keep thinking, oh, I need, maybe tomorrow or maybe next year, and they never actually, and we all know this, the longer you take to take the plunge, the less likely you are to do it. So, what advice would you have for someone who's thinking, well, I'm not really sure this, I know I've got a great idea too, Doug, but I just don't know.
Well, the when you have a life-threatening disease when you're a kid, you're always reminded that life isn't infinite. When I
Yes.
first got this kidney disease in 1972, or first was made aware of it, uh, people were dying from kidney disease all the time, and so it was never a slam dunk that I could make it, to past 30 years old or anything like that. Other people had died very early from this disease, and so I always had this sword of Damocles kind of hanging over my head from a young age. And so I said to myself, you can't pretend that you're going to live forever. And so, in effect, for a while, I had pretended I was going to live forever. I came up with the idea, and again, it was nascent, but I knew it was right. It was time to leave, so I just pulled the trigger and left. But the thing that a lot of people do is they've lived for decades maybe, and they think, oh, life will go on the way it is, but life doesn't last for forever. So you have to eventually say, let's do it. I could have tried to do this part time,
Mm.
and
So why didn't you? Why did you go full in? Why didn't you go, the so-called easier route, which is, go part-time?
there's you remember Malcolm Gladwell and others came up with the so-called 10,000 hour rule
Yes, I remember. I know
to
that.
come up.
Yeah, to
Yeah,
become an expert, yes.
right. And so I was at maybe 1,000 hours of just puttering around with my head, and if you're working part time, I mean, if you spend another 20 hours a week, you're basically at 1,000 hours per year trying to figure out a problem. So you work out 40-hour a week, you commute another 10, you
Mm.
come home, the wife, the kids are all kind of neglected while you spend another 20 hours a week doing the problem, and you're only inching along towards becoming expert in this. Or you could just toss it and say, I'm going to spend every waking moment, every business moment on these problems. And that's kind of what I did. So you basically triple or quadruple the number of hours that you have available to you by quitting your full-time job and getting deep into your problems. So it takes a little bit of personal courage to do that, and but if the idea is good and strong, and I knew mine was, then you just pull the trigger and you go with it.
Awesome, awesome. I think I love the answer. I think it's you have to take the plunge at some point.
Sure.
And I think that depending on your sensibilities and your risk tolerance, maybe going part-time or starting this maybe as a side hustle or whatever people want to call it, it can work for some people. But I do like the idea that as long as you have a plan, obviously don't do this without a plan. As Jim Rohn said, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So have
Right,
some sort of plan, but sometimes taking the plunge is the best way forward. And if you don't risk anything, you risk everything. You risk your dreams.
right.
So hats off to you for for taking the courage and taking the plunge.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was a big deal. So yes.
And it's paid off and it's done really well. So how are you motivating yourself? Where do you see yourself? I know the business is doing well, but what's your personal aspirations? Where do you see yourself in 5, 10, 20 years time? Or do you
Well,
have any
I
goals
see
like
my,
that?
I'm sorry?
Do you
I
have
think,
those sort of goals for those sort
oh
of goals
yeah,
for
yeah,
yourself?
yeah.
No.
Well, I see myself leading this nascent industry into becoming more widespread. I see myself pushing this into universities and saying, hey, you need to have first a section on this in your economics course, that it needs to be an entire course, then it needs
Mhm.
to be a concentration, and it needs to be eventually a major at university. So I see myself pushing that way. I also see myself pushing this into government. The government is unaware of these forces largely that we can discover and portray, and so this prevents a lot of negative fallout from making decisions that aren't fully informed. And so what we're trying to do is to show people that you can get more information and make better decisions if you pull all this data together and actually figure out what the landscape is that you're find yourself in. So this is the idea. So 5 or 10 years from now, I intend to be leading this worldwide movement called Hypernomics into the mainstream. So that's where I pretend. That's why my goal is to go forward here, is to push this into the mainstream.
That's an admirable goal, and I look forward to
Yeah,
seeing your journey along with that. That's brilliant. That's absolutely
yeah.
brilliant. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up. So, do you have any parting advice for people who are looking to build their dreams but are still sitting on the fence?
Well, do a solid assessment before you decide to make the plunge. I mean, I did, and don't leave your family destitute because you've got an idea that might be half baked. But if you've got your idea mostly baked or fully baked, or you know there's a path to it, take the plunge. You're only going to live once, and you're not going to live forever. And so, what you don't want to have, I mean, we've heard this from a lot of people, is you don't want to be on your deathbed just full of massive regrets. And I imagine myself, you know, 13 years ago, sitting on my deathbed, not taking the plunge and watching this whole discipline kind of fall into the muck because I didn't take it up. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be on my deathbed thinking that I could have pulled the trigger on this and had some success and didn't do it. I said, if you really believe in what you're doing, pull the trigger, take the consequences, and be brave. Just bull your way through it. So that's what I tried to do. And you should try
Fantastic.
to do that too, if you've got that kind of idea.
Fantastic. So, tell us, Doug, how can we find you on the internet? How can we connect with you?
Well, you can go to my company website, which is hypernomics.com. That's hypernomics.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn on Doug Howarth, and on Facebook, Doug Howarth. And uh, I've got a book out for sale called Hypernomics: Using Hidden Dimensions to Solve Unseen Problems. You can find that on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and the Wiley websites. So there's a few ways you can connect with me. If you go to the company website, you go to the info@hypernomics.com, you can write me and I can write you back.
Wonderful, wonderful. So if you are listening to us on the podcast, the links that Doug has just mentioned will be in the show notes. And if you're watching us on YouTube, then down below in the description section, we'll have his link to. Do check him out and see how he can help you understand your business dynamics in a much more multidimensional way. Well, thank you so much, Doug, for being such an amazing guest for today on Friday Feature. We have to have you back on Money Talkies, but for today, thank you so much.
Gull, thank you. I really appreciate being on your show. Thank you so much.
And thank you for listening to me and Doug today on Friday Feature. I will be back with another amazing guest finding out how they changed their life by changing their mindset. Until the next time we meet, this is Gull Khan signing off. Take care and bye for now.